Like our workouts were functional, and we moved weight, but we did it in a fun way that still felt like I was getting the workouts I wanted and needed. So that's I think it's something you're really talented at is understanding individual needs and wants of the workout and then also kind of programming to that.
No, I appreciate that, and I do think it's an art, and my philosophy is I would rather train someone at 90% for 1,000 workouts than train them at, 100% for 5 workouts. It's just like nutrition, if you eat one healthy meal, that's considered the healthiest meal in the world, once a week, that doesn't do anything to you. It's about consistency.
Welcome to Iron Summit, where we cover topics about health, fitness, and general performance through the eyes of former elite Division One wrestlers. All right, we're live. We're live here with Eric Marcovcy, who is my friend and was my strength coach while I wrestled at Lehigh University. Eric is a former college football player for East Stroudsburg University. After that, he competed in mixed martial arts, was a powerlifting national champion, recruited by the WWE, was on the WWE Tough Enough TV show where he was a finalist. Get into that a little bit. But Eric's not only a strength conditioning coach at Lehigh, but he's also a great businessman and father. And what I really admire about Eric, and one of the things I look forward to talking to him about on the podcast, is how Eric really embodies the how you do one thing is how you do anything. And I think Eric kind of does everything he does in life with excellence and grace. So, Eric, happy to have you on Iron Summit. I'm
I
excited for this
appreciate
one.
it. Yeah, long time coming here. I've been following you guys and patiently waiting my turn here, but excited to be on and share a little bit. And as I said before we got on, everything is fair game, and I regret saying that immediately.
Eric, we're pumped to have you, and you're somewhat of a legend. I've heard a lot of stories and just a lot of like, we you got to talk to this guy from Lehigh people. So I'm excited to pick your brain a little bit today.
Great. I can hope I can hold up to that standard here. Tough standards.
Well, we'll start with some serious stuff here, Eric. One of the first things I want to cover, and I think I went through several strength and conditioning coaches at Lehigh, and by far and away, you were the most effective. And I think you really understand, not only how to coach athletes, but the importance of being strong for athletic. So I wonder, take us through a little bit your thinking there. Where does strength play a role in athletics for you? I'll leave it pretty open ended.
Yeah, well, just background. This is my 21st year here at Lehigh, and one thing that I'm very proud of is that I continue to evolve. I think this industry is filled with egos, right? And they're afraid to grow. And I laugh at myself back at what I did, 20 years ago. I laugh at myself at what I did, last year. And I think it's very important that you're willing to grow and evolve. And I think that's made me somewhat successful. Not having an ego, still being competitive and wanting to grow and get better. And man, in the past, how many years you've had to because things have changed so much. If I compare the athlete that came in 20 years ago to the athlete that comes in now, it's completely different. It's a lot harder. There's so many gaps that you need to fill that aren't associated with, my job description. It's so different. So athletes come in a sense better, but worse. 20 years ago, it was, a piece of putty that I got to mold. And now it is what people think is a finished product, but it's finished in the wrong way. So it's a lot of corrective type things, both physically and I hate to say it, but mentally. Athletes and not putting them all into one bucket, but are much softer than ever before. So I enjoy that challenge, and it's probably the most, joy I get out of my job is, and correct myself, it's not a job, it's my lifestyle. That expression, like if you don't want to work a day in your life, you find something you love. That's what I've found, right? So it's not a job whatsoever for me. But back to it, it's evolving that person that is so much fun because it leads to more than just success on the mat, on the field, on the court. It's so rewarding when you see, and Max, I take full credit for all of your success. That's where I'm going with this, right? So, you're obviously successful on the mat, but you know, man, the opportunity that I have with putting athletes in vulnerable positions and having them evolve physically and mentally is great, and I'll get a message, fairly often from athletes that are, 10 years out and now they appreciate the stuff that we had them do and the grind that we put them through. So, it's crazy because strength is so important to me, but on my list and my hierarchy of, what my job description is, it's actually third. So, number 1 is injury prevention, and that's huge. It's huge because you have to have them perform while they're here, but it's also huge because you got a life after athletics. And both of you guys are doing big things because you have the body still to be able to do it. I see a lot of people that are destroyed at 30 years old, wanting to, throw the ball with your kid, at 50 needs to be thought of now. And I truly do think about that when when I'm working with our athletes. So that injury prevention aspect is number 1. And then number 2, and this really rivals number 1, is training those intangibles because again, that's going to make you who you are in your athletic, whatever it is. But it's also going to have the most traction outside of your 4 years. So, building that toughness, building that competitiveness, building that leadership cohesion, that self-awareness. And self-awareness might be the biggest one now because so many people just lack that. They think they're better than what they are. They can't see themselves from the outside in. And because of that, they lose out on so many opportunities. So that's my number 2 is those intangibles, and it's fun putting those aspects into training. And then third is the strength training. And I say third, but it's really fifth because in that bucket of strength training, it goes rest and recovery, it goes nutrition, and then training. I put them all in the same bucket, and they're all the same. This really discredits me as a strength coach to put myself that far down on the list. But it's the reality. So many people, think they're a god and they think that, what they physically do in the room is going to, have this great impact on the mat, on the court, on the field. And it's really not unless you have the health, unless you have the head and the heart. Okay. And you guys know you can't develop unless you're sleeping, unless you're eating, so those aspects are all ingrained, and that's fun, because at heart, I'm a teacher. I enjoy doing that. So this gives me that much more of a platform because there's so many other areas. It's not just, teaching somebody how to squat. Now, listen, that is so important. The biomechanics of movement are gigantic because that leads into the injury prevention, which is number 1, right? So I need to make sure that obviously that's there in my teaching, but it's fun when I have a sleep school and I talk about that with the guys. It's fun when I have, a nutrition talk with them. And then I can see the gains and I can see them, being excited about it and really changing their life because those are life changing type things. You're kidding yourself if you don't think that you need sleep, nutrition when you're, in a big meeting or you're doing things afterwards, or, maybe the hardest job of all being a parent. And I am not an expert in any of these areas. I don't have a PhD in any of them, but I'm my own experiment. And I think not having an ego and being willing to learn and adjust and grow and change allows me to, really learn a lot about certain topics and talk to athletes the way they need to be talked to. So I think that's really helpful, and it makes my job very gratifying.
I think that's super interesting, and I wanted like this whole time you're talking about this, I really thought about this. It's funny that you bring that up and how it's changed over the last 20 years. And I can only imagine, especially with like social media and the internet, it's like there's so much information out there, and you got to kind of be the guy that helps sort through this information because I think you have a lot of athletes that come in with like these preconceived ideas of what they should or shouldn't be doing. And then you gotta kinda, like, convince them the right way and mold them down that path instead of just having someone coming in and trusting you fully. And something that I see in our college guys, and I'm talking specifically wrestling, but, I mean, I think it's probably pretty accurate across most sports, but I'd love to hear your opinion on this. It's like, our guys know enough to be dangerous, and so they got a lot of pushback on strength and conditioning, and so we do end of the year meetings, and we're like, "Hey, rank, sports nutrition, lifting, conditioning, practice plan, coaches, like, how you feel about all these?" And across the board and talking to, our other coaches that have been, coaching for 20 plus years, they're like, every year, strength and conditioning has the highest variance, and you got guys that are like 10 out of 10, everything was great, or like 2 out of 10, didn't like this, this, and this. And when they talk about, we do our, meetings with them, they all say conflicting things. Like this guy's like, I wanted to lift more, I wanted these to be harder, I wanted this and this. And then this guy's like, we lifted too much, it needed to be lighter, it needed to be this. And so you're dealing with so many different personalities and people that grew up doing something with this, and then like being able to uh I don't know, have them believe in the program, but also you knowing the right thing for them and what they're actually gonna like do consistently. How do you navigate that? Because it's such a tough job, and I think student athletes especially are pretty stubborn and unique people in a sense of where they're gonna probably I'm sure you've had athletes try to tell you what they think is best for them, and you're like, "Listen, I've seen it. I'm gonna tell you everything I can, try to convince you," and sometimes we're still gonna do the opposite.
No doubt, it's a great question, and it's funny because I was just talking about this yesterday. We had a sports performance and sports med collaborative meeting, and we're just talking about some of this. And in the past, it took me one day to gain credibility with our athletes. It was, I am the strength coach. Well, that's enough to be said. But to your point, now it's like, I got this attaboy coach at home that tells me, everything that I want to hear. They post pictures of me on social media, make me look awesome, right? And it's a one-on-one deal where it is tough to compete against that. So now it takes me, a month, maybe a year, maybe 2 years to gain the credibility. I think that we do have a pretty high success rate because of my ability to listen and educate. Like that's the number one principle in this whole thing is we want to turn them into strength coaches. So there's got to be an education process with that. And explaining the why to them is just so important. So they need to understand why they're doing it, and more so now than ever. But it is tough battling the guy who's selling them snake oil, and to be honest with you, I mean, sometimes stealing their money. And it's really, really sad, but it's the truth. And Max will tell you, our heavyweight wrestlers have always been a challenge. And Max, I remember him vividly his first year, and he was as strong as an ox. And the first thing I did with him, I brought him in and we did one-on-one lifting. And that's typically what I do with, I hate to put you in this bucket, but our problem guys, right? And he wasn't a problem guy at all, but he was a guy who was notoriously in there, you know, doing, cable crossovers until the cows came home, right? To try and build that jet in the beginning, because he wanted to be big and strong, and he was that. And I can remember it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I put together this workout with all of this stability, or instability, demanding stability with PVC pipes, or earthquake type bars and different things. And I crushed him. At that time, I think I was like 36 years old. And he was, filled with, piss vinegar and testosterone, and was like ready to get after it. And I owned him. And it was because he was strong, but he wasn't necessarily wrestling strong. And, that same thing happened with a ton of our athletes. Nate, our heavyweight right now, is the perfect example. All he wanted to do last year, not this past year, but the year before, was lift heavy. He just, he felt that, in season, he needed to keep his strength. He needed to keep his strength. And my job with him is pulling back as opposed to pushing forward. We push forward in different areas like his conditioning and his mental toughness and his dynamic, aspects of training. But that's not fun. You don't get that same pump. So it was tough. And this year, if you watched him wrestle, he was a different animal. And I know it was because of that. He trained a little bit different and was able to perform the way he needed. There is, man, I hate saying this, but there is a top end of strength that you can have, right? So once you hit a certain mark, and Nate can bench, 450 and squat 650. I'm rounding up a little bit. You're welcome, Nate. Uh, but it's not much that I'm rounding up. But there's a top end to that. And then he needs to train, that dynamic aspect, because there's not a top
Right.
end to that, right? You can, never be too dynamic, and his conditioning and really his mental toughness and his grit, so those things need to be trained once you get to that top tier, and that's
That,
kind of where he's at.
yeah, that's that athletic training. You're not just training for strength. But and I want to give you some credit here, Eric, because one thing you did, like with me, I wanted to be a meathead, and you saw that, and you design workouts that increase my ability. The year I trained with you is my single fully healthy year at Lehigh, and I do give you a ton of credit for that. But you also understood I wanted to be a meathead and still incorporated a lot. So like our workouts were functional, and we moved weight, but we did it in a fun way that still felt like I was getting the workouts I wanted and needed. So I think it's something you're really talented at, is understanding individual needs and wants out of the workouts, and then also kind of programming to that.
No, I appreciate that, and I do think it's an art, and my philosophy is I would rather train someone at 90% for 1,000 workouts than train them at, 100% for 5 workouts. It's just like nutrition. If you eat one healthy meal, that's considered the healthiest meal in the world, once a week. That doesn't do anything to you. It's about consistency, and, obviously you were a little bit easy. I was able to do that and still, go 99% instead of 90%. But yeah, it's meeting them, just a little bit above where they're comfortable being at, so you can have that consistency. And I have a unique position where I work with so many sports. I just finished women's basketball training here, and I loved it. It was awesome. Everybody's goal, in this field is like, I want to be, the strength coach for X sport, and it's like this pinnacle, Alabama football, not gonna Lehigh wrestling, right? I wasn't gonna say
There we
anybody
go.
but them, right? So, that's their goal, but, I don't know, it's a little empty. I love the variety. It is so much fun because it is training the person, and, I wanna train different people. I just had a really good job offer, 2 years ago at a Power 5 basketball school, um, that I didn't really think about too much. I could train 16 guys and only 16 guys. I think I could do it really well, but I love the variety. I love going from our wrestling team to our football team to our women's basketball team to our women's lacrosse team. That excites me and it juices me, because there's so many opportunities to evolve people then.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool thing too is, your story with Max, and just seems like it's not a one-off story. It's like we were talking about earlier, like it used to take a day to get respect, and then now it takes a lot longer with everything. But I think kind of leading from the front like that and the leadership values of, hey, I'm gonna go in there and grind with you. And that's one of the coolest things that I like about wrestling is like you actually wrestle your coaches. Could you imagine playing football with your football coach? And so, like, when the strength coach shows up and is lifting with you and, like, in the trenches with you, you garner that respect, that rapport, that relationship. And then, like, I'm gonna follow that guy, to the gates. I'm following him all the way. And I think that you've recognized that. It seems like you understand that and you continue to do that. And the other thing is, like, obviously you're super fit. And I think it's like you don't trust a skinny chef. Like having a jack strength coach also gives you a lot of credibility too. And like I say that like kind of tongue in cheek, but like I'm serious. At the same time, like
Yeah.
you can trust the guy that actually lives his life that way, and then the guy that's in the trenches with you too. And so I think it's really cool that you're able to create that environment where people trust you. And then it's like, listen, this is authentically me. This isn't just like some uh some job that I'm doing and like a fake version of me. And then I guess going off of that, what do you think about when you're training people? How do you think about this where you obviously don't have time to like you don't have time to individualize every single program for every single person, but you also got to like cookie cutter certain people, one-offs. Especially I think about a sport like wrestling where you got, guys cutting weight, guys going heavier, or football where you're like, these linemen need to bulk up and these speed guys need to do maybe more dynamic stuff. How do you think about putting people in buckets versus, you just don't have all the time in the world to individually train every single student athlete? How do you, I guess, categorize those?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And just going back to your comment before, that is my biggest fear is, father time obviously is going to get the best of all of us. Is that when I'm not able to do that, that is going to be a challenge. So thank you for reminding me.
Sorry. No, you're doing
Um,
great.
Yeah, well, no, and listen, it gets harder and harder every single year, but, it's what motivates me to stay consistent in all of my areas so I can still do that. Like, that's my reason for living a healthy life is so that I can still do that, on a day-to-day basis. So, that's huge. And going back to your question just as far as individualizing, versus team training, this is a big struggle because I told you my hierarchy, right? So injury prevention one, and then those intangibles number two. So injury prevention obviously demands some IDP, some individual development, right? So you need um, you need to make sure that you hone it around that person. But if you're training intangibles, training as a team is second to none. Lehigh Wrestling has such an advantage. I shouldn't be saying this out loud because I don't want to give away our secrets here, but such an advantage over other programs because we are a team. And, when I first started with wrestling, I have a wrestling background, but not the same as, our guys who are on the team. And I tried to train them like I train all of our other teams. It did not work, right? I tried to put them all into one bucket and try to train those intangibles, increasing the temperature of the room and trying to have guys, just compete and battle each other. And it didn't work. That philosophy literally lasted about 10 minutes in our first workout. And then I'm like, this cannot be this way. These are different animals. So I had to adjust, but I still have to stay true to, that philosophy that I talked about. So it is very important that we train as a team, um, because the bonding in that area is so, so important. I still remember when Darian Cruz won his national title, it was like, the biggest celebration. Everybody hugged him and like everybody high-fived him because everybody felt a part of it because they grinded with him in every single area, whether it was eating in the dining hall together, whether it was training in the weight room, it's all done together. And I think that has such value. Training by yourself, if you are the most dedicated and motivated person, it is second and a far second to training with your team, no doubt. That external stimuli of a guy next to you competing is so, so valuable. And we have that. We have such great competition in what we do in all areas. And it just raises the bar. So those intangibles, I truly feel in Lehigh Wrestling are higher than most programs because of that close knit aspect. But I still gotta, recognize that there needs to be that IDP or that individual development plan for the individuals for the injury prevention and also to get that last, I'm not even going to say 10%. It's that last 2%, right? Because
Sure.
most people have the same deficits. If I do any kind of, screening in the beginning, typically find out the same thing across the board, because everybody lives a similar life, on their phones, rounded forward. Everybody is anteriorly dominant. They don't have an understanding of their posterior. Wrestling is a little bit different, okay, but it still, fits with the trend. They got valgus because of, you know, their feet suck or their glute medius is they don't even know how to engage or whatever it might be, right? And they're all very similar, but it's that last few percent that you need to specialize. And that was Max, right? So that last 2% we extracted and he was an All-American because of that. He was so close, but you guys both know the difference between being on the podium, okay, and being a step off is so, so minute. So it is crazy how you need to fill all of these different things in, and it's gotta be a feel, right? You can't make a program, that is, 3 months long. I create a lot of stress for myself by writing programs out of season 1 week at a time, in season 1 day at a time. And we've never duplicated a program. I can honestly say that. The philosophy stays the same and a lot of the core aspects stay the same, but it continues to evolve and it continues to adjust relative to need. So I talk to them because I have value in the guys' opinions. They know their bodies. For me to tell them to do X when they feel they need Y, it doesn't work, right? Because they're going to be, half-hearted with it because they don't believe in it, and they're the one living in their body. I would always rather do, and I continue to mention is something at 90%. As far as the value of it, right? So this is very generic and vanilla, but I would rather do this exercise that's 90% as effective but 100% committed to it than the other way around 100 times out of 100 because effort, I think, is the most important thing in
Yeah.
training. You beat your I heard you say it on this podcast, Max,
Yeah.
you tear yourself down to build yourself up. So every time you train, you inflict damage on yourself to evolve. And you got to be willing to do that. You got to be willing to punish yourself to take that next step forward.
Yeah. There's a saying I like. It's the best program followed with 80% intensity. It's far worse than a worse program followed with 100% intensity. It's just
100%.
about that intensity and effort. Um, yeah, I think another thing, Eric, in back to kind of Ryan's point on individualization, one thing you did excellently, I think, with the entire wrestling team was understand the different needs of different weight group position, and then be able to program for us individually, but then still have us train as a team and have that competitive spirit. And I also, going back a couple other points back, was the fact that you are able to do that across all sports and something people don't realize is a lot of times Power Five schools have way less athletes than mid-major or rest of Division One schools. Lehigh had like twice almost 1,000 student athletes, right? Almost twice. That's like I know Colorado University, for example, has 400, maybe 380. Now Alabama, usually when there's a really big football program, it's actually less student athletes because of Title IX. So I think it's really a testament to your ability to kind of understand individual needs, but also program as a team. Not to give you too many compliments because it makes me uncomfortable doing so.
Well, thank you, and making you feel uncomfortable, that makes it all worthwhile because that's the way
Yeah,
you evolve, right?
exactly. Yep. You got to push it. That's why I give Ryan compliments too.
All right.
No one gets more
All right,
uncomfortable
guys.
than Ryan.
So, Eric, I do have a question though. Like, how did you, what was your first, like, what made you decide this is what you want to do? Like, obviously, you got to love this stuff, to be in it every day. It's very evident that you love this stuff. What was like your first initial thought, growing up or, post college where you're like, hey, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, well, I had an injury-riddled career. I tore my ACL 3 times. I never got the 3rd one fixed, so I don't have an ACL. in my right leg, but I'm completely functional. Can do absolutely everything just because I practice what I preach, right? So I continue to do everything that I need to. Luckily the weight room is right outside my office door, so that really helps. So I don't promote not getting it done unless you live this kind of this lifestyle. Uh, but I had an awesome mentor, and a guy named Ed Ruiz, who is really world renowned in speed training, and strength training as well. And he really molded who I am and taught me to do it the right way, and taught me to train people. And that was helpful for sure. But to be honest with you, I wasn't sure that I really wanted to do this. I actually went back to school for my master's. I was working at Lehigh, and I was working at Speed Advantage Training, and I went back to Lehigh, or I went back to East Stroudsburg to get my master's. As I was doing that, and I actually was getting a dual master's where I was going to get my teaching cert in phys ed. To be honest with you, just to be vulnerable, I was scared of this field. It just like any at that time, I think I was a 20-year-old or 21-year-old. Um, you are fearful of work, and strength training is a lot of work. I'm here at 6 a.m. I don't leave until 8. I'm like, can I really do this? Like, I don't want to do this. And then, you know, the money that you make relative to the hours that you work scared the hell out of me. So I'm like, you know what? I want to get my teaching cert and be a phys ed teacher because that seems like a pretty cushy life, right? Right? No disrespect, because being a teacher is really challenging nowadays, but, you know, having my summers off and, having stability and structure, I hear of all these strength
Nine
coaches
to
always getting
five.
fired and all of this. So to be honest with you, I got scared into getting a dual master's until I took my first master's class, and it was called Learner in the Learning Process. I can honestly say that I've never quit anything but this. I went to 2 classes. I was like, "There's no way in hell that I can do this." Like, you just read novels and talked about it. I'm like, "That's not me. I cannot do this. Like, I'm not gonna do that." So, I decided that, the only route for me was strength and conditioning. And listen, there was definitely some turns along the way, which I won't get into, and nor will you guys. Um, but,
Are you talking about the WWE
well, yeah,
Death?
so yes and no.
We will.
Uh, so
Hey,
I got
check the
derailed.
thumbnail. It's gonna be
Yeah,
up.
I
Yeah.
got derailed, a little bit from my goal, and then went back to it. That expression, I'm gonna get this wrong, but if you love something, leave it go, and, how does that go? Does any of you guys know that?
If you
If you
love
love
something,
something,
let it go.
yeah, let it go, and it'll come back, and we're gonna have to Google that, how that goes. But,
I think I get what you're saying.
I let it go, and I found out that I loved it, because of it, right? So, it pulled me back, 100 times in force, and I think you need to do that. You need to know the other side before you can love the side that you're on, and I think that's human nature to always think the grass is greener on the other side, and I think it's
Some
what probably kept
sometimes
me
you
at
gotta
Lehigh.
go sometimes you gotta go take some pictures and speedos to find out you love strength and conditioning coaching, is what you're saying.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. That's exactly what I'm saying.
No, I think it's a I love that story, that and the fact that you came back to it, and something else, I'm gonna give you another compliment. I know I know you won't, you're very humble, but when I was first training with you, um, one of the I loved your intensity, the way you showed up, and then I found out that, that was right around when you had your second son, very premature. So you were, like you said, you were showing up at 6 a.m. We were getting lifts in at 6. You were intense. I never would have known you had a battle going on like you did on the home front. And then I found it just made me respect you that much more. Like, you showed up, it came to your job with 100% intensity, no matter what was happening. And, and Eric, and we'll get into it a little bit when we talk about Screenwise, but Eric, how much premature was your son born at that point?
Yeah, he was one, of 2 twins, so him and Nadia were born at 23 and a half weeks. He weighed 1.4 pounds, and she weighed 1.2 pounds. She didn't make it. She had a very severe brain bleed. Ryan had a brain bleed as well. But man, talk about toughness. He is the person who I respect the most in this world, and he is 9 years old right now. It's crazy to say, a 9-year-old is my hero, but he truly is. And it's taught me so much. So he was in the hospital for about the first year of his life with so many challenges. His lungs were the
which is
biggest thing.
while you were training me
Yeah,
that
yeah.
year.
Yeah, so I would work in the morning. I would drive to Philly, to St. Chris and to CHOP. He was at both of those hospitals at different times. So I'd drive to those hospitals. I would spend some time with him because that was just so important, for me to read to him, for him to know he had a reason to live. It's like anything. If you care about someone, they're gonna commit themselves to it. So there's no different than what I did with Ryan and what I do with my athletes. I saw so many little babies die. I would go there, on Monday, and there would be a new baby next to him on Tuesday. Um, but the sad thing is I didn't see those parents there. So if you show somebody you care, they're gonna reciprocate, and they're gonna give you everything they have. And I truly believe I give myself no credit for Ryan's persevering through all of this, but at the same time, I do think it had a little bit to do with it that he knew people cared and people, loved him. So, by reading to him and spending countless hours with him. So, I would spend the afternoon there, and then I would, come back and train teams and often go back at night, to do that and then find a way to do my programming. I don't wish that upon anybody, and I don't know how I did it, but I think you just find a way to do it. And humans are built, to do so much more than what we're really doing. And, I truly believe that everything is that's happened to me for, a reason. I understand, athletes so much better, because of my 2 sons, and my older son is on the spectrum, he has autism, and it's given me so much more patience and understanding with teaching and, coaching kids, and then, Ryan, with everything he dealt with and never having an excuse, and then, you have a kid who has 2 exams in a day and gives you, this BS that he can't do X, Y, or Z. I have very little patience for that, but it's an opportunity to teach them. Every year at Ryan's birthday, I talk to them about our athletes, about his story, to kind of put it in perspective. And listen, there's people who have it a lot worse than I do. And God bless them. But, it's my story and it's true. And I feel it's very important that I share it, with people so that they can maybe take something from it and evolve, themselves. Because like I said, you know, I- we get absolutely, nothing out of what we're, actually capable of doing. Um,
Yeah.
so
What
yeah,
was oh, yeah. It was, it's an inspiration to me. I didn't even know you were going through all this. Like, someone else had to tell me, Eric was going through this when we were training together, and you would have never, and I truly mean, you would have never have known. 'Cause Eric showed up with intensity, he crushed lift with me, had a positive attitude. It's just shown me, it taught me a lot how to carry myself through trying times in life. So thank you for that.
absolutely.
And I think thanks for talking about it. It was one thing that I think is truly inspirational about you and your family.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's sweet too. I think just to be able to touch so many people with that story too. When you talk to athletes about it, because I think that's such a difficult time that you went through, your family went through, and Ryan went through. But at the same time, like how much good has come out of you being able to share that and put that in perspective for people. That's really cool, and be able to spin that and turn that into a positive thing is yeah, that's awesome. I respect that big time, and that's sweet.
I appreciate it.
Um, all right. So a little lighter topic now is, and this is also something I always enjoyed when I was training with you. And maybe you were just telling me this because you knew I was a meathead. But you always talk like look good, perform good. Um, talk a little bit about that. I know. they crack down on it now in a lot of college weight rooms and lifting with the shirt off and stuff. But Eric used to let us just like
Tarps off.
get in there, take the shirt off. You even encourage watching like the muscle contraction in the mirror.
No doubt.
I think it was something, and it was like kind of a fun culture to be had too. With like, you are there because you want to perform good, but also, hey, it's fun to look good, and especially when you're wrestling, you got to look good in the singlet.
No doubt. And that goes into that tier two, right? Those intangibles. I truly, truly believe that. And, that, I mean, it goes with anything. If you are a businessman and you put on your best suit, you have more confidence going into that business meeting. It is in all aspects of life, right? So you got to make sure that you have that in your philosophy in this world as well, right? So, if I look at myself in the mirror and I see, someone who, I'm proud of, then, damn, I'm going to be able to perform because that confidence is just so, so important. And I don't care what sport you play. If you're or a golfer or you're a wrestler or you're a football player, so important. That the thing is though, is that, your mind is and I don't want to get in the weeds here, but is the determining factor of that. There's so many people that are in sludge, right? And they don't have confidence in themselves. So I think that's just as much a part of it is, yes, doing that, Flex Friday where we get our arms right, but, also, juicing them up a little bit and telling them that, that they're the man and that they look good or whatever it is. I continue to tell Darian, especially now that he's, on his way to the Olympics, about how awesome his tricep looked in the picture of him winning nationals. Like it was awesome. Like that was the reason why he won because he looked so damn good going into it. And I want him to have that mental image going into the Olympics because, I think that will ultimately help him.
That's such a good point too. I think it's like the, look good, feel good, play good. But there's such a confidence booster, even I think just general fitness. Like you start feeling like you have changes in your body and you have confidence in yourself. You carry that into, a boardroom meeting. You carry that into, walking down the grocery store aisle and talking to, a cute girl, or you carry that into a lot of different ways. So I think that's super important. It's super cool because I think it's definitely something that gets overlooked sometimes. And there's such an intimidation factor, I think, in wrestling too. I remember like, growing up, you see a kid that's like walking around jacked and you're like, uh-oh, I gotta wrestle that jack, dude. Like this is gonna be a tough match.
No,
Yeah, you
no
can
doubt.
win some matches before.
But I think there's a tipping point on that too. We do have some athletes that, that I don't think look the part, but they think they look the part. And then, you still gotta stay hungry, right? And I
Mhm.
think that, that is such an underrated aspect of it. I am so tough on myself in so many areas. Man, I regret saying this before I say it, but like I look at myself in the mirror often and I'm like, you suck, man. Like you gotta be better. I'll look back at pictures of like when I was like, 25 or 30 years old,
I know
to,
what
to,
picture you're referring to.
to motivate me. Well, listen, Max, you're going to look back. It is just like Darian's tricep picture, you throwing the bicep up after you won. I think it was in the blood round. I don't know. I
Yeah, it
forget
was
which one
around
it
the
was.
12.
Yeah. Yeah. Is
Yeah.
like an awesome picture. Like I hope that is, framed in your house, but, from the waist up, because there was a little too much
It,
to see in that picture.
it's
Yeah.
framed in Ryan's
Yeah,
house.
no, I
Yeah.
have it.
That's all that
It's
matters.
right next to my bedroom. So every time I go, good night, Max, and then I go to bed.
There you go. But, you're gonna call on that for motivation. I mean, listen, you're still in your prime, no doubt, and I know you're gonna be there for, many years, but there's gonna be, a cliff that goes off and you gotta find, motivation. Again, that father time is undefeated.
Well, and speaking of that, this is one thing I thought was always funny. You'd be like, Max, I know you're going to be in good shape in 10 years, but then you would tell other athletes, you're going to be fat. Like you're going to fall out. You're going to like, I can't wait to see what you look like in 10 years. How do you know?
I decline ever saying that to anybody. So I don't know when
Allegedly.
when
Those weren't the exact words,
when
but it was the summation of what
well,
you were saying.
like, listen, here's the thing. It is such the truth. I told you about like that external stimuli and you needing, that catalyst. Some people are who they are because of the catalyst of, the room, of myself, whatever it is. It is really, really difficult to be intrinsically motivated. There's very few people that are, especially in the suck of training and the monotonous, world of training. And man, results are hard to come by. So, you see a person's, mentality and you know that they work hard when you got their hand on their pulse. But as soon as you take their hand off or your hand off their pulse, you can see a big dip. And that is the determining factor of who they're going to be in 20 years for sure.
And I can say with like Eric was like 100% accurate with these predictions that he never made.
Allegedly, Max.
Yeah,
Allegedly.
he never made.
Hey,
It was like I'm like thinking back, I'm like, wow, Eric was like uncannily.
Eric, that's really funny actually. Eric, I want to kind of transition from that to like, what's your personal training look like? Because like you touched on, I mean, college athletics, it's long hours. You're busy. You got kids. You got a family. Like, how do you balance your personal training and getting everything in that you want to get in personally, as well as doing your job at a high level, being a father, being a husband, being somebody that has all these different plates you're spinning? What's your training look like, and how do you stay up to date with all that?
Yeah. First, my nutrition is the biggest part of my training. I am so diligent with that. I have one cheat day a year. That's it. I don't recommend that for anyone, but now it's kind of who I am. So it's what I do. And that day I go ham. It's like 20,000 calories and it is a stop absolutely everywhere.
What
And it's
day?
like it's my birthday, October
Nice,
6th.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I make a whole like, screen or a slideshow of it and everything like that. It's pretty epic. It's awesome. Um, but it's like getting drunk off of tequila. You don't want tequila for a long time after that, right? If you're throwing up on it. So it makes me sick and it makes me feel like shit. So I don't want to do it. I feel guilty even when I'm doing it because I can see what it's doing to me. I vividly remember last year I went and I got one of those. I don't even know what it was. It is too long of a name from Starbucks, but it's like the Capo Mocha Frappuccino, whatever. And as I was
Max
drinking it,
knows what it is. Ask him the name of it.
uh,
I don't
as I
drink
was
milk in my coffee,
as I was
by the way.
drinking it, I hated it and loved it at the same time. It felt like shit, but it was like a drug, and I kept on picking it up and drinking it. I was drinking it on my way to the donut shop to get donuts, right afterwards, and it really, puts things into perspective, on how addictive things are, what it does to your body, and your mind. Like, the whole day really sets up the rest of the year for me. But then my diet is on point with what I do. And that's, really every day. And then, my training, unfortunately, it's not what I want to do. It's what our athletes need. So, I just had a group of guys in here, about 3 hours ago. And it was, some of our wrestlers, some of my interns, and I trained the way our wrestlers needed to train, not the way I wanted to. To be honest with you, some of it isn't healthy for me. I got an MRI not too long ago on my shoulders and it says labrum absent. So I don't have labrums in either of my shoulders.
Down an
Absent.
ACL,
Yeah,
down
yeah,
down a
Yeah.
labrum.
no doubt. So I am a train wreck. And yet I'm doing like all this dynamic stuff and all of these things because that's what they need. But it's so good to train like an athlete. It's so good for your body. So everybody asks me when they leave athletics, what type of program should I be on? And often I tell them the same. We're doing all the things that you need to do. We're training balance, which, balance and grip strength are the two things that are most important, in I mean, not post college,
What
but in
why
an
is that?
elderly
You
training.
you hear grip strength a lot, and I don't know if it's like a proxy for like it's if you have it's hard to have a strong grip and not have strong muscles. But like, why do we go to grip strength? Because I understand balance. Like you don't want to fall hit
Yeah.
your hip when you're 80.
But they're two of the same. And again, this isn't post college, but most people break their hip or break their femur because they fall.
Yeah.
And if you have grip strength to be able to grab onto a railing,
Okay.
then you're not going to fall. So it's as simple as that. You know, I mean, listen, grip strength and, cueing your central nervous system, there's some correlation with all of that. Some strength coaches, even do like a grip strength prior to training to see how ready the readiness of their athletes. I don't believe in that
Right.
because I think they should be ready regardless of how they feel, but that's, a different topic. Um, but to train those things, all throughout your training career, I think is so important because, you know, if you don't do it at 30, you're not going to do it when you're 60. And when you're 60 is when you need it because you don't want to break your hip at 60. You're not going to recover from it. So, that balance, that grip strength is important. So, those are things that, you need to incorporate in. And then just the dynamic. So I am training athletes and I'm, cold and I have to do, a broad jump or whatever it is. So if my body's not prepped for that dynamic training and I'm cold at the same time and I'm 44 years old, good luck. My hamstring is going to be laying on the ground or my Achilles is going to be torn. So, it's all prep um, you know, for my job, my career, right? So that I can, still demo things and do them, where people can respect me. So as much
Yeah.
as I sometimes just want to train like a meathead bodybuilder, I end up training like an athlete. But to Max's point before, we do throw some of that stuff in there, just to juice the guys and because kind of is what I want to.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
I want to.
so I'm training 6 days a week, and like this time of the year, like yesterday was a double session. I ran with a group of football guys in the morning, and then I lifted with some wrestlers in the afternoon. So, sometimes as many as 2 training sessions a day still.
That's awesome.
What can you take us a little bit through what your nutrition looks like?
Yeah.
Do you have yeah, I learned a lot about nutrition from Eric, and I think you have some really interesting beliefs, but I think they all are true.
Yeah, so, I'm an experiment for myself and it is so tough. My diet has changed so much throughout my life. And it's scary because you often hear the loudest voice. We were just talking about it today. There's, when Game Changers came out, how many athletes went, vegetarian.
Crazy. Yeah.
And, it's nuts. So, I really try and experiment with myself and what makes me feel the best. And then I, tell people about that. And it's not a one size fits all, but, take a couple pieces from here and there and, and make it your own. I think the biggest part of my diet is I try and eat, um, as much whole food as possible. That is the number one thing. And the sourcing of my food is so, so important. I think that's such an underrated aspect. People focus so much on nutrition, but then, they're not sourcing their food, well enough. And I think that's important. Like my beef is all mail order from a certain place. I eat probably 90% organic. I'm a true believer in that, and just eating whole foods. I'm around 250 grams of protein a day at a weight of 205. So I eat a ton of protein. For sure. Most of that comes from beef. Second would be chicken, and third would be dairy. So that's a majority of my protein. My carbohydrates um, primarily come from fruits. Number one. And number two would be rice and potatoes, would be number two. I do eat a lot of eggs. I have chickens. We're actually building a house and moving for, a big reason is because I want more chickens so I can eat more eggs that are, such better quality and much
Yeah.
more bioavailable, sources of nutrients. And because I want a cow. So we're getting a miniature cow so I can drink, that milk because we drink a ton of milk in my family. And I am on the bandwagon, which it's, not for everybody, but of raw milk too. And how nutritious that is for you. So, I want to source my food where I know where it's coming from, because if you don't know where your raw milk is coming from, it's probably not a good idea to drink that, right? So you need to make sure that you're on top of this stuff and you just didn't fall into your fads of that. Um,
Yep.
I eat raw liver every morning. And I know that's a fad, but I've done my research on it and it's sourced extremely well. I cube it up and keep it frozen, and it's much more palatable when you
Do
throw.
you eat it frozen?
Yes, yeah, yep. So, the
Yeah, I
secret is
tried some not frozen the other day, and
terrible,
it's
terrible.
not
Yeah,
I
it's not
did
fun.
I did it for a little while, and you
But
do the salt and honey, man, and it's disgusting, but you just choke it down.
so
you just,
here's
like,
here's
chew
some
it and then
secret.
kinda swallow it like supplements.
Yeah. So some tricks to it. So number one, if you're gonna eat it frozen, you have to get a really, really sharp knife and you have to cut it up while it's really frozen. Just be careful because you don't want to cut your finger off. And then you got to freeze it while it's still frozen, because if not, it's so gelatinous, it'll just form back into a cube, and then you can't, like, just one big cube, and you can't do
Yeah.
that. And then for people just starting out, obviously a smaller cube is better. Um, but eating a scoop of peanut butter beforehand is really good because it coats your mouth. I'm gonna date myself here, but it reminds me back, there's a Simpsons episode. Do you guys watch The Simpsons?
Used to, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So Homer Simpson was, I'm derailing this big time.
I know, I love
Homer
it.
Simpson was doing in a chili cook-off competition, and somebody beat him, so he drank candle wax to coat his mouth in wax, and then he ate like a ghost pepper just straight, and he ate like 5 of them, and he hallucinated. It's really good episode, so you might wanna YouTube that one. But it's almost the same philosophy. So coat your mouth with something, and I know, some people don't believe in peanut butter because of the palm oil and different things like that. And there are peanut butters that you can get that are very expensive with palm oil. I do eat peanut butter. It's a natural peanut butter. It does have palm oil in it. I dump as much of the oil out when I first open it, but I need the calories. And to be honest with you, um, it's my probably one vice in eating,
I
and I
love peanut
still feel
butter.
Ryan
great.
too.
Yeah, I love peanut butter.
Yeah,
You guys
yeah,
are peanut butter guy.
yeah. Max, are you a peanut butter guy?
I like it, but not as much as, like, you. I don't, like,
Don't
go
put
out
on
of my
hey,
way to have it.
he's not on the list. That
Yeah.
answer, no, absolutely
So
not.
no, like, the only time I eat it, I put it in my protein shake because I get a really crappy tasting protein. It's called, naked protein, which is just basically whey powder. So I, make that with milk and a scoop of peanut butter, and it tastes really good. I mean, I don't eat for taste at all. It's all for performance. Like, taste is so secondary. I really live my life this way where it is, the instant gratification versus the long-term benefits, and eating is the perfect example of that. There is no long term of taste, right? You eat it and then it's gone, right? So, if I'm eating something, I put no stock into the taste of it. I think about what it's doing for me. It's a little sadistic, but it's like, what is
No,
this
I like
doing
that.
for me? And then that benefit of the long-term effect outweighs the taste, of it. Now, I'm a hypocrite because I'm
So,
saying I put
with
peanut butter
the
in that
with the
shake to make
liver
it taste
dough,
better.
and then you do the same. You eat a little peanut butter before the raw
Well, I
liver.
don't do that anymore. Like, I don't mind it anymore. I just put it in my mouth, put it in the side of my mouth, take like 3 chews, and then take it down like a pill. And I usually take like 3 cubes. It's a little over a half an ounce a day that I eat. But it's so rich in bioavailable vitamins. So that's every morning. I
Yeah,
drink athletic greens every morning. Um, I eat 4 eggs for my chickens every morning. I
that's great.
tur-
Just
tur-
4.
Yep. Well, and then I have turkey bacon, that's uncured, unprocessed. Once I have more chickens, I will get more eggs, but, my
Don't
kids
try to
eat eggs every morning
don't
Joe,
too.
try to get in an eating competition with Max because he's like, "Oh, that's it? I'd eat 12 eggs a day just for breakfast."
Yeah, those junk store-bought ones, so I got you beat.
Hey,
So,
how do you know? How
fast
do you
your
know?
race.
and then I,
Mm,
about every 3 hours, I'm eating something after that, and then I try and cut my fuel off. I'm a big believer in trying to cut my fuel off. I'm not an intermittent fasting guy. I did that over COVID, and I see that it has good results, but I can't get enough calories that I need. So it's not for everyone.
yeah,
But
better
I try
for a restrictive diet. Yeah.
100%, 100%. So I try and cut my calories off as best I can around 5 o'clock, and then eating in the morning, and that's relative to my day. But I try and, on the weekends, I'll push that back as much as possible, whether it's 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. Really trying to have a big window of not eating as best I can before I go to bed. There's a lot of good research on going to bed with an empty stomach and producing hormones in that first cycle of sleep. And I
Mhm.
need as much hormone production as
Yeah.
possible at my age, so I try and do that as much as I can.
I also think an underrated thing is just you digest better sitting or standing than laying. And something I've noticed is when I try and do like I eat I eat a lot more calories than Eric. See, he's skinny. I'm just kidding. Not really. But I try and cut my eating off at like 7 p.m. Pure like yeah, for the hormonal effect we talked about, but
So you're
also
saying
just
I
for
beat
my
you?
gut.
You're saying I beat you?
But beat me by eating. If you mean eating less calories, then yes.
Sorry, derailed, but yes, I,
Yeah,
I
so
think
I
that,
just like I agree.
yeah.
I
And
agree,
I think
even though
many
I'm
people
doing it
should do
better.
that. And listen, in athletics, that is really, really tough. This is one of the things I talk to my athletes about a lot
Sure.
is scheduling your day appropriately. Because in our society, our biggest meal happens at the end of the day. So our athletes do a terrible job of eating this like, this 5-year-old breakfast, whether it be like a honey stinger or like a Pop Tart or whatever it might be, right? And they eat this crappy breakfast and then they just get by the whole day and then they practice and then they're ravenous and then they eat this huge
Yeah, and then
meal at
they
like
eat
7 o'clock at night. Yeah. And then they go to bed stuffed. They don't sleep well, so they don't recover well. And then it's just this wheel of being terrible. So, for them, my biggest thing, I am not a nutritionist, but I talk about fueling yourself. And the number one thing is structure. So structure is number
yeah, you
one
gotta
in
plan
what you
ahead.
do. 100%. So you need to get 70% of your calories in as an athlete before practice. That is a non-negotiable. That needs to happen. And it's the same thing with hydration. You need to get 70% of your hydration in before practice. And it's for two reasons, right? It's so that you are fueled going into practice. So many people worry about the post, but who cares about the post if you don't have the energy to tear yourself down to need the post? So you need to, have the energy, put gas in the car to drive it. Don't worry about, anything else until you actually, drive the car. And then you can worry about the post later. And then from the sleep end, which is the number one priority, you sleep better. But also, if you're drinking late at night, you're waking up 3 times to go pee in the middle of the night, and it's not quantity of sleep, it's quality of sleep. So you need to be, man, in a coma for 6 hours, which is much better than sleeping crappy for 10 or 12 hours, and that's what a lot of our athletes do.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's such a good point too. Like same thing. I realized like I'd chug a bunch of water after practice at night and it was like, all right, now I'm gonna have to keep getting up to go to the bathroom and you lose your sleep quality. And then like you said, I think just like on accident found out like I feel way better after having at least 2 or 3 big meals before practice than like, showing up at even like morning workouts. I'd wake up even if it was a 6 a.m., 7 a.m., I'd wake up an hour and a half before to get some food in because I'd feel absolutely awful if I didn't have food, hydration, and then salt too,
Yep.
especially with sports where you're sweating a lot or if you're like outside and it's really hot. But I love that. So you're obviously super passionate about this. You got a new company you just started called Screenwise. Maybe we could wrap up with you kind of talking about that and what you're doing with Screenwise.
Yeah, yeah. Good segue into that, as it kind of wraps everything together, the nutrition that we just talked about, my family life, as well. So obviously Ryan being premature, dealt with feeding difficulties all of his life. So he was G-tube fed for the first year of his life. And we, my goodness, did everything to try and get him to be able to eat. It's really sad, but Ryan's never asked for food in his life. He's 9 years old. Fe Food is not important to him whatsoever. It is a chore. So my wife and I, this was the most challenging thing. He needed, X amount of calories, so he would need to eat with frequency. So, we would have 4 meals a day for him that were true meals, and we would sit next to him for about an hour each meal and say, Ryan, take a bite. Ryan, take a bite. So we met a brilliant behavioral therapist that really helped us out. And we used the iPad to motivate him to eat, which sounds really scary, right? Why do you want your kid in front of technology? But the thing is, for Ryan, he needed to eat to be able to live. So I'll give him anything for him to live, right? So, he needed that number one. And the thing is, you know, 4 hours of our day was spent sitting at the table and not enjoying each other. Now his meals take 20 minutes with, the aid of technology, and we get to spend, that rest of that time playing games, having fun, doing whatever it is. So if you weigh the two, just like I said before, the immediate, all right, versus the long term, man, I'll take that quality time, that long-term time, over the immediate. And with our product, it weans them off of it as well, so there's not screen dependency. So, it's called our company is called Screenwise Eating, and the first app that we developed is called Yum Eats, which is based upon behavioral therapists, which, uses basically a reward system, to promote eating, and it's with challenging cases like Ryan, but also my niece who is underweight and just doesn't like to necessarily eat has used it and had a lot of success as well with it. So fast eating, slow eating, picky eating, anything like that. Um, and it's crazy how many kids challenge with eating. And then, when you start to put in kids who have ADHD, autism, and those type of things, it's astronomical. So it's an opportunity. Listen, it's a business that I'm passionate about, but it's so much more than that. It's an opportunity to help people, which is great. Because I had my struggles with it, and I wish that upon no one. And it shouldn't be like that. So this is a great way for me to use my experience again to try and help other kids, which is awesome. And then we have a branch off of that that's called Table Talk, and it's more for autism. And this was kind of with my older son Luke, who is on the spectrum, and being social is a challenge. And in our society, eating is very social, so it uses a very similar aspect to try and get them to be social at dinner time. So, really cool. And I'm really juiced about it and the opportunity to help people. So I appreciate you asking about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's such a cool story too that like you saw a need based off of your personal life and then created something that's going to help a bunch of other people. I think that's like the best company. So I'm super excited to kind of follow that and see how that goes. And then my fiance does a lot of she does clinical research right now with neurodevelopmental disorders. So I'll definitely want to pick your brain a little bit more offline
Yeah.
about stuff like that. And I think that's really cool. And thank you, man, for coming on. I think you have such a unique and interesting story, and your passion shines through. Appreciate you coming on. We definitely need you to come on more and talk some more meathead stuff. And I want to hear more stories about Max. So I got somebody that was actually there and hear it from you. But thank you, man. This has been awesome. I've had a great time getting to know you, and appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, I
Thank you, Eric.
appreciate you guys and the platform you're giving guys to talk about this kind of stuff. You're doing awesome work, so appreciate that.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, you got it.